Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about politics and language. We all speak language and consider it to be something essential for communication. We think and speak through words. We tend to believe that we possess the language. It is something we take for granted, as if we were born with it. We never stop to think that language possesses us more than vice versa. It is important to realize this because right after this comes the following thought. If we are possessed by language, then certainly someone is controlling the usage of language, which means that someone controls the way we think and converse. To find out what is the relationship between language and politics, we must turn to George Orwell. In his novel 1984, he had given a vivid picture of the controlling mechanism of the state. In it, he discusses many socio-political aspects of a centralized controlled regime. But today we would focus on a specific relationship, that of politics and language, on which he has written a separate essay entitled Politics and the English Language. Our heads turn towards writers, poets, and today's parlance, meme creators when we talk about those responsible for ensuring the decay of language. But Orwell considers decadence of language as a symptom of decadent civilization. As he says, our civilization is decadent and our language, so the argument runs, must inevitably share in the general collapse. Further elaborating the perpetrators of this sin, he continues, it is clear that the decline of a language must ultimately have political and economic causes. It is not due simply to the bad influence of this or that individual writer. Language is a social medium, not an individual medium. Its coordinates spread socially. It is like a web in which a particular group of people has consensually agreed to communicate. Therefore, an individual writer is a part of that group. He or she is not at the helm of the ship, appearing every time on the mainstream media and trying to say to others what and how they should speak. Ask yourself, how many times have you heard a writer speak on mainstream media? And then ask yourself, how many times have you heard Biden or Trump or Sunak speak? These innocent-looking politicians, Orwell says, are responsible for the rise or decline of language. But before Orwell grabs the neck of these politicians for their vices, he argues that the corruption of language has spread into political pamphlets and journalism. So he turns his eyes towards journalists first of all. His staleness and lack of precision, according to him, have mutilated the language so much so that, he laments, prose consists less and less of words chosen for the sake of their meaning and more of phrases tacked together like the sections of a prefabricated henhouse. Further expanding on the symptoms of this political illness, he underscores pretentious diction, especially the inclusion of foreign words as evidence of scruffy, hasty, non-deliberative use of language. He explains, foreign words and expressions such as cul-de-sac, ancien régime, dose machina, mutatis mutandis, status quo, Gleichschaltung, Weltanschauung are used to give an air of culture and elegance. Except for the useful abbreviation, i.e. example and etc., there is no real need for any of the hundreds of foreign phrases now current in the English language. Bad writers, especially scientific, political, and sociological writers, are nearly always haunted by the notion that Latin or Greek words are grander than Saxon ones. And unnecessary words like expedite, ameliorate, predict, extraneous, deracinated, clandestine, subaqueous, and hundreds of others constantly gain ground from their Anglo-Saxon numbers. It would have been better if there would have been pretensions, but at least with meaningful words. Orwell laments that writers, especially political journalists, with their empty heads throw words on paper without context, thereby without meaning. The hot-headedness that comes with obsession of saying something and then repeat that thing over and over again blunts the meaning of words. There is no innocent word in politics now. Every word is distorted for propaganda. Democracy, for example, for which the 10,000 fought at Marathon, is now merely a word at the mercy of political agents. Orwell elaborates it thus. In the case of a word like democracy, not only is there no agreed definition, but the attempt to make one is resisted from all sides. It is almost universally felt that we call a country democratic, we are praising it. Consequently, the defenders of every kind of regime claim that it is a democracy and fear that they might have to stop using that word if it were tied down to any one meaning. Words are amoral in themselves. Their association provides them meaning. This phenomenon can be seen played out in global politics all the time. Orwell himself provides examples of how meanings are distorted within the political sphere through politically motivated statements. He says, statements like Marchand Pétain was a true patriot. The Soviet press is the freest in the world. The Catholic Church is opposed to persecution are almost always made with intent to deceive. Other words used in variable meanings, in most cases more or less dishonestly, are class, totalitarian, science, progressive, reactionary, bourgeois, equality. One can add statements like make America great again, stop the boats, etc. to this list. Politicians are worried about meaning. They are not completely indifferent to it because they know they are the ones who have the authority to change the meaning. On 14th March 2024, we saw the BBC reported in their headlines, ministers have unveiled a new extremism definition. After reading Orwell, would you not wonder? New definition? Political communities decided meanings on the basis of generational consensus, and now how can political elites decide a meaning? Orwell's answer, political communities determine meaning. Political elites deconstruct them to exploit them. Politics thrives in vagueness. Since atrocities and lies have to be justified, words have to be used loosely so that unforeseen associations can be established. In fact, linguistic techniques have to be employed to fit irrational rhetoric. Political affiliation enforces dumbness. A thinking person cannot speak like that. As Orwell highlights, by using stale metaphors, similes, and idioms, you save much mental effort at the cost of leaving your meaning vague, not only for your reader, but for yourself. This is the significance of mixed metaphors. The sole aim of a metaphor is to call up a visual image. When these images clash, as in, the fascist octopus has sung its swan song, the jackboot is thrown into the melting pot, it can be taken as certain that the writer is not seeing a mental image of the objects he is naming. In other words, he is not really thinking. This is the result of orthodox belief. In a world where right-wing orthodox parties are gaining momentum during the year when we will have elections in 64 countries all around the world, we must acquaint ourselves with Orwell's wisdom regarding the relation between language and politics. There is no politics without rhetoric, and there is no rhetoric without language. Hence, it is necessary to teach rhetoric in schools nowadays like the ancient Greeks and Romans. We receive the world through language, listening and reading. We project our world through language, speaking and writing. Our consciousness creates space for itself in the moment, as Camus explains in the myth of Sisyphus, that moment when Sisyphus is going down the mountain to start the pushing process again, to start the suffering again, the moment when we have time to think about what we have listened. Orwell lived through the Nazi propaganda. He reported on the Spanish War. He knew what the best tool for orthodox maniac political regimes is to brainwash the public. Repetition sans pause. He exclaims, orthodoxy of whatever color seems to demand a lifeless imitative style. If the speech he is making is one that he is accustomed to make over and over again, he may be almost unconscious of what he is saying, as one is when one utters the responses in church. And this reduced state of consciousness, if not indispensable, is at any rate favorable to political conformity. He continues, thus, political language has to consist largely of euphemism, question begging, a sheer cloudy vagueness. Defenseless villages are bombarded from the air, the inhabitants driven out into the countryside, the cattle machine gun, the huts set on fire with incendiary bullets. This is called pacification. Millions of peasants are robbed of their farms and sent trudging along the roads with no more than they can carry. This is called transfer of population or rectification of frontiers. People are imprisoned for years without trial, or shot in the back of the neck or sent to die of scurvy in Arctic lumber camps. This is called elimination of unreliable elements. The recent blatant lies against UNRWA are clear evidence of what Orwell is talking about here. To reiterate, in today's world where there is much media content generated than can be consumed, we live in a world which is much more information heavy than Orwell's world. Therefore, our level of attention to detail must be more accurate. The most painful thing to hear from anyone is to keep out of politics. Or this has nothing to do with politics. Or even worse, politics is dead. All these illusions are thrown into the public through various media to bring a sweet slumber over our reflective capacity, Orwell claims. This is usually done when insincerity is common in politics. They want you to just not pay attention, but that is precisely the moment when we have to pay attention, as Orwell stresses. The great enemy of clear language is insincerity. When there is a gap between one's real and one's declared aims, one turns as it were instinctively to long words and exhausted idioms, like a cuttlefish spurting out ink. In our age, there is no such thing as keeping out of politics. All issues are political issues. And politics itself is a mass of lies, evasions, folly, hatred, and schizophrenia. When the general atmosphere is bad, language must suffer. He's not just asking us to pay attention to the political side of things, but also to the linguistic side. In this heated debate regarding the bad influence politics has brought on language, we tend to forget our actual aim. He does not consider himself immune to this declining spirit. He acknowledges that his environment has corrupted his mind too. He puts his hands up and says, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. A bad usage can spread by tradition and imitation, even among people who should and do know better. The D-based language that I have been discussing is in some ways very convenient. Look back through this essay and for certain you will find that I have again and again committed the very faults I am protesting against. After having beaten himself too for this crime, he does provide suggestions for a scrupulous writer. If he or she has to avoid this linguistic decline, he suggests, a scrupulous writer in every sentence that he writes will ask himself at least 4 questions. Thus, what am I trying to say? What words will express it? What image or idiom will make it clearer? Is this image fresh enough to have an effect? And he will probably ask himself 2 more. Could I put more shortly? Have I said anything that is avoidably ugly? He does not stop there. After providing these open-ended questions, he also gives us a set of rules that must be followed in today's world where everyone wants to write with instinct. Of course, instinct gets tired as well. We need a method of writing in this insane world. When everyone is writing at the heat of the moment, everyone is swayed by emotion. A serious writer would stop, think, and then write. Here's Orwell's advice. One needs rules that one can rely on when instinct fails. I think the following rules will cover most cases. Never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. Never use a long word where a short one will do. If it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Never use the passive where you can use the active. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. This is an advice from the writer whose name is taken alongside Woolf, Dickens, and Austen. We should take him seriously. Orwell concludes with hope that future generations will listen to his advice and the world might become a better place. I conclude this with his conclusion. Political language, and with variations this is true of all political parties from conservatives to anarchists, is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. One cannot change this all in a moment, but one can at least change one's own habits. And from time to time, one can, even if one jeers loudly enough, send some worn out and useless phrase, some jackboot, Achilles heel, hotbed, melting pot, acid test, veritable inferno, or other lump of verbal refuse into the dustbin where it belongs. Thank you, everyone.